are listening to another episode of HC Daily, a daily devotional podcast that you can listen to at home or on the go. We believe that you can grow as much as you want to grow spiritually, and this podcast can be a part of your daily growth plan. So, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify or your favorite podcast app, we're glad you're here. Now, let's join our hosts, Jeff Forrester and Chris Zarbaugh, in the studio.
Chris.
Jeff.
Man, it's good to be in the studio. It's good to be doing another episode of HC Daily.
Yeah, and I'm excited that you guys have tuned in or you're watching on YouTube.
They keep coming back.
Yeah, well, that's good.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and you know what? We actually appreciate the fact that we're being able to minister beyond our reach. And in fact, we'd love for you to even share this with somebody. Either tell them about it or forward them the link.
Yeah, it's fun going on this spiritual growth journey together, right? Because we grow when we're working on these things, preparing these things. Even when we're talking, every once in a while you say something really smart that, touches my heart and makes me think, I want to be a better follower of Jesus. So,
that hasn't happened yet with me.
Yeah. Well, today's the day.
Today's the day. Right now,
right,
it's
holding
happen.
out hope right here. So we're going to read a long passage today, John chapter 11. But man, is this amazing story. Yeah. This is Jesus has raised a couple people from the dead, but this one really digs into, you see Jesus as a friend, you see Jesus as somebody with compassion, you see the humanity of Jesus, and then this immense power to overcome death.
And there's a lot in this story.
It's tremendous, yes. So it's going to be fantastic. So I'm just going to jump right at the very beginning. We're going to read John chapter 11. I'll start with verse 1. And we'll stop somewhere when I decide it's time to stop. So
he just doesn't want to say it. It's like 40 verses.
47 verses or something.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay. Well, some of us like reading the Bible, Chris.
Yes.
So, okay. So it says, a man named Lazarus was sick. He lived in Bethany with his sisters, Mary and Martha. This is the Mary who later poured the expensive perfume on the Lord's feet and wiped them with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was sick, so the two sisters sent a message to Jesus telling him, Lord, your dear friend is very sick. But when Jesus heard about it, he said, Lazarus' sickness will not end in death. No, it happened for the glory of God, so that the Son of God will receive glory from this. So although Jesus loved Martha and Mary and Lazarus, he stayed there. He stayed where he was for the next 2 days. Finally, he said to his disciples, let's go back to Judea. But his disciples objected. Rabbi, they said, only a few days ago the people in Judea were trying to stone you. Are you going there again? Jesus replied, there are 12 hours of daylight every day. During the day, people can walk safely. They can see because they have the light of this world. But at night, there is danger of stumbling because they have no light. Then he said, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but now I'll go and wake him up. The disciples said, Lord, if he's sleeping, he'll soon get better. They thought Jesus meant Lazarus was simply sleeping, but Jesus meant Lazarus had died. So he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sakes, I'm glad I wasn't there, for now you will really believe. Come, let's go see him. Thomas, nicknamed the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let's go too and die with Jesus. When Jesus arrived at Bethany, he was told that Lazarus had already been in his grave for 4 days. Bethany was only a few miles down the road from Jerusalem, and many of the people had come to console Martha and Mary in their loss. When Martha got word that Jesus was coming, she went to him to meet him, but Mary stayed in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would have not died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask. And Jesus told her, your brother will rise again. Yes, Martha said, he will rise when everyone else rises at the last day. Jesus told her, I am the resurrection and the life. Anyone who believes in me will live even after dying. Everyone who lives in me and believes in me will never, ever die. Do you believe this, Martha? Yes, Lord, she told him. I've always believed you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one who has come into the world from God. And then she returned to Mary. She called Mary aside from the mourners and told her, the teacher is here and wants to see you. So Mary immediately went to him. Jesus had stayed outside the village, the place where Martha met him. And when the people who were at the house consoling Mary saw her leave so hastily, they assumed she was going to Lazarus' grave to weep, so they followed her there. When Mary arrived and saw Jesus, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. And when Jesus saw her weeping and saw the other people wailing with her, a deep anger welled up within him, and he was deeply troubled. Where have you put him? He asked. They told him, Lord, come and see. Then Jesus wept. The people who were standing nearby said, see how much he loved him? But some said, this man healed a blind man. Couldn't you have kept Lazarus from dying? There's always complainers in the crowd, isn't there? Jesus was still angry as he arrived at the tomb, a cave with a stone rolled across its entrance. Roll the stone aside, Jesus told them. But Martha, the dead man's sister, protested, Lord, he's been dead now for 4 days. The smell will be terrible. Jesus responded, didn't I tell you that you should see God's glory if you believe? So they rolled the stone aside. Then Jesus looked up to heaven and said, Father, thank you for hearing me. You always hear me, but I said it out loud for the sake of all these people standing here, so that they will believe you sent me. And then Jesus shouted, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out, his hands and feet bound in grave clothes, his face wrapped in a headcloth, and Jesus told them, unwrap him and let him go. Many of the people who were with Mary believed in Jesus when they saw this happen. But some went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the leading priests and Pharisees called the high council together. What are we going to do? They asked each other. This man certainly performs many miraculous signs. If we allow him to go on like this, soon everyone will believe in him. And then the Roman army will come and destroy both our temple and our nation. So, dude.
That is a heck of a story.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and I love how much detail it gives. There's so much care and tenderness.
Yeah.
Jesus wept, the shortest verse in all the Bible, by the way. So as a kid, did you ever have Bible drills where you had to quote verses?
John 11:35.
Yeah,
Jesus wept.
Just wept. Yeah, because if you knew that verse, you can quote it in a relay.
Yep.
But but you know what? One of the things that I love about this, well, I love a lot of things about this, but I love how Jesus knows before he goes. So he says, Lazarus is dead, and watch this.
Right.
This is what he says.
Right.
He says, now you're really going to believe.
Yeah.
I also love the fact that Thomas, who's called Didymus, he's one of the twins. He's the doubting Thomas later on.
Right.
He says to his followers, hey, let's all go with Jesus, because they just said, if you're going back there, they're going to stone you. You might die.
Yeah.
Like throw rocks at you until they crush your skull.
Yeah.
And he says, okay, if Jesus is going, I'm with him.
Yeah.
Let's go with Jesus and die with him.
Right.
So, I mean, you can overlook that pretty easily.
Unless he was being sarcastic. So there may be a little bit of sarcasm there, because they've already said, Lord, you can't go back to Judea. They just tried to stone you a couple days ago. And so Thomas is like, oh, great. Let's go back and we'll go die with him.
You're right, because it says, then he winked.
He didn't wink.
He didn't wink.
No, it didn't say that.
No.
But so it could be either way. It could be that he's being sarcastic, going, well, then let's go too. We're all going to die.
Yeah.
Or it could be that courageous thing. So it depends on where he's at in his walk.
I guess so, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
It's cool. Either way. I'm not trying to shoot down your idea. I just think mine's better.
No, so we could say that about all the Bible verses. I'm the light of the world. Just kidding.
Yeah, no. So that's not true.
I know.
So
I know.
Basically what it comes down to is Jesus has already stirred the pot in and around Judea, and he's kind of laying low right now.
Yes.
But this is really rushing towards his crucifixion, right? We're just a little ways out, and he's just outside the city of Jerusalem. So he's come down from Galilee. He's been heading this direction. He's heading to the cross. But before he gets there, he pauses and he goes and spends some time with his very best friends, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, which they've popped up a few times in Jesus' story. And he loves them deeply. And you see Mary, eventually it describes here, she's the one who comes and anoints Jesus with the very expensive perfume and all that stuff later on. And it's just astounding to me to think of Jesus with friends and buddies outside the 12 disciples. But you think about it, the very first miracle was at a wedding. Jesus was sitting around going, not Jesus, but the people were sitting around going, well, gee, who should we invite to the wedding? Oh, make sure we invite Jesus to the party, right? And then here, you've got friends that aren't the disciples, that you find Jesus has stayed at their home, Jesus eat meals with them, all that kind of stuff. And how he treats them is not like a teacher, like he does with Peter and James and John. He treats them like friends too, but these ones he treats with kind of an intimacy of friendship and care on a level that I don't know that we see a lot of times in the rest of it. He's so compassionate to Mary. He's so compassionate to Martha. And then he weeps over Lazarus, and they go, see how much he must have loved Lazarus.
Yeah. And, the raising of Lazarus is really significant as he heads toward the cross because, again, this whole week we've been looking at how he's, demonstrated his power and authority over all things. He has authority to forgive sins. He has authority over the physical ailments. He has authority over spiritual principalities. He has the authority over nature and wind. And here he's demonstrating his authority even over death. So that when he does die on the cross and when he does rise from the grave, this is going to speak into all the people who say, well, "Wait a minute, I'm not sure I believe that," and they're going to be like, "Wait a minute, but didn't he raise Lazarus from the grave?"
Right.
So he's leading up. Like you said, he's upping the bar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Palm Sunday is coming up. From we're recording this, and Palm Sunday is just 2 Sundays away from this point, right?
Right.
And it says in that scripture that when during the Passover week, and Jesus comes in during the triumphal entry, and you're going to be preaching that Sunday.
Yeah.
And it actually says that many people were there because of this miracle.
Right.
So he drew crowds and crowds of people there.
Well, this captured people's attention like nothing else.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a really big deal.
I guess this is probably the biggest miracle this close to Jerusalem.
Mm.
Right? So Bethany's just a short walk down the road from Jerusalem. People seem to know who Lazarus and Mary and Martha were because people had come from all around to comfort them after Lazarus had died. I don't know that they were super prominent, but they seem to be fairly well known. When Jesus shows up at their house at other times, there's crowds there, coming to see Jesus. And then when he does this miracle afterwards, some people believed. A bunch of people went, "Wow, anybody can do that. He really is the Son of God." And others went and tattled on him to the Pharisees, right? Which is such an odd thing. I think if I saw somebody raise somebody from the dead that was 4 days in the tomb that already stunk because they were in the tomb for so long, and they come walking out completely wrapped up like a mummy, alive, I can't imagine going, "I disapprove of that. I need to go tell somebody." Right?
Right.
But they did. They went and tattled on him, and the Pharisees immediately went, "Oh no, what are we going to do?" The Sanhedrin. It's like, he's going to convert everybody. Everybody's going to believe in him. We can't do this. And so they decide this begins to be another one of the reasons why they decide they want to kill Jesus.
So their objection was like, "Hey, we don't want to roll a stone away because it's gonna smell really bad, right?"
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the King James version? What it says?
He stinketh.
He stinketh.
Yeah.
Yes, we both grew up reading that.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought of when it said that. But
Lord, he stinketh.
He stinketh. Yeah. So it's sort of, if you're going to teach off of that, one lesson that can be applied to our lives is that, like, sometimes the work of God is gonna stink. It's gonna be terrible. It's going to smell bad. It's going to be difficult. It's not always going to be glamorous, right? I remember one time when we were in La Carpio, we went to Costa Rica, and there was a city called La Carpio, and it was really just, 100,000 refugees that had come over from Nicaragua who had no home. And then, the city of San Jose said, "You can have this garbage dump, this field where it's just waste. And there's like raw sewage in the streets, and they lived on top of each other with corrugated houses. It was just absolutely awful." And so we went over there, and they were building a house. There was a team of people running a vacation Bible school. Anyway, so the team building the house were building this thing, and what they didn't realize was right next to them was this sort of like where everybody dumped their garbage. And we're talking like it had been, my prediction would have been that people have been dumping garbage there for like 5 years. So when so eventually the team cleaned it up, and I think it was like 70 or 80 5-gallon 3 mil bags. Okay, so that's a lot.
Yeah,
we're talking like the worst smell and the most. Okay,
yes.
So here's what happens.
They can almost smell it through the microphones.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, there's everything in there. Well, as they're building the house, this woman named Lisa Payne, come to find out, she lives like in an $8 million house. She, back in Beverly Hills. I think she still lives there. She's trying to sell it. And she's the CEO of this company. In fact, their company built the Partridge Creek Mall. Okay. And so she's in the habit of just, showing profitable quarters, She looks over and says, "We can't reveal this house and have this garbage dump." She goes, "Come help me clean this." Well, the team is only like 10 people. And they go, "We are not going near that." Like, they could barely hold their breath, right? And so they said no. And she says, "Come on, let's clean it." And they said, "No, we're not going to do it." So guess what Lisa does? She goes out and buys all the bags, and by herself starts cleaning it up and won't stop until finally everybody's like, "Great."
Yeah.
And so they have to go out and help her. Well, they get done, and later on at the end of the missions trip, here's what Lisa said, and here's the point. She said, "I got more joy cleaning up that garbage than I did any time I've ever given a profitable quarter report as a CEO to my company."
Wow.
And so it was messy, it was smelly, right? And yet at the same time, it conveyed more love to the people in that village, I believe, than even building that house.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Getting a perspective, Jesus' perspective is really what that's about, right?
Yeah.
Is seeing it from Jesus' perspective. I think that's important for us to do when he talks at the first to the disciples. He talks about Lazarus' death like sleep.
Mm.
It's interesting to see how God views death because nobody actually ever dies permanently,
Right.
right? You're going to live forever somewhere. It's just his body quit working.
Yeah.
That's what happened. His body ran out of gas, and so now Lazarus got out of the car, but the shell of that car was still there, right? That vehicle. And so he viewed it just as sleep. If we would view life and death like Jesus does, I don't think we would be nearly as afraid of death, for one.
For sure.
And then his power over it, the fact that he steps up and he's not intimidated by death. He's grieving over what his friend went through, but he saw that this moment when his body stopped working, if Jesus had been there, he could have healed him, and then he would have had a healing story. But instead, even greater glory came from his death, and then Jesus stepped in, raised him from the dead, overcame death and the grave and all those kinds of things. And what a greater story. Then church history has that Lazarus lived for many, many years after. Even by the time Luke is writing his book, Lazarus was supposed to still be alive. So how cool is that to go sit down and interview Lazarus and say, so let's talk about that for a minute, right?
Yeah.
These guys wound up being great testimonies in the early times of the church because of the mighty power of God working in their life. Had they gotten what they prayed for, please heal me, they wouldn't have gotten what God needed to do, and the even greater glory and more impressive impact of Christ as he's heading towards the cross. Now everybody can believe me. I have the power over life and death. The creator of life, it's no problem at all for me to overcome death, right? I can bring life back. And by the way, when it's all done, I'm going to shed my blood on the cross. And I'm going to prove to you I am who I am because I'm coming back to life.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, another teaching point that could be made from this is symbolically, Lazarus comes out of the grave and he's still covered and bound up with his grave clothes. Yeah. And then what does Jesus immediately say? He says to the friends, help him take off his grave clothes. Yeah. And a lot of times when we become a Christian, we cross the line of faith, we sort of walk around with our grave clothes on, like the sins I used to do, I still do them. Yeah. The habits I used to have, in other words, there's no change. And what we end up doing sometimes is, if we don't allow God to change our heart and our desire, and if we don't respond to God, and follow him out of gratitude for what he's done for us, it's almost like we walk around with our grave clothes on. It's like we were dead, and now we're no longer dead. And that's a symbol of what the Bible says, right?
But we're just acting like it.
We were dead in our sin, and yet we're not taking off our grave clothes.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of times we have to recognize, like, hey, man, we're dead to sin. We were dead in sin. Now we're dead to sin. And so we have to shed the things that are holding us back. Mm-hmm. And you know what? I heard a Sunday school teacher a long time ago talk about how if Lazarus was dead 4 days, he's really mad that Jesus called him back. So he's up in heaven enjoying. Yeah.
Come on, man.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, Jesus is like, Lazarus, come forth. And he gets sucked back in the body. He opens his eyes. He's like, oh, really?
Yeah.
I was having a really good time.
Yeah, that wasn't at Lazarus' top of his list after he'd been in heaven for 4 days, right? Right. Man, if I just go back to that place.
Right. Go from perfect paradise. Yeah. So,
so how do you think he lived the rest of his life?
Oh, with complete, I bet you it was different.
Yeah. Total confidence in God. Everything's going to be okay.
Oh, yeah.
You wouldn't be afraid of anything. This is why Paul says in the epistles, he says, death, where's your sting? Right? So for the Christian, that's what we're going to discover. I think that the fear of death is great for many, but what you find out is in Christ, there's no sting anymore. It doesn't have the power that it has. When you really believe that Jesus is who he says he is, when you really believe there's a real heaven and a real hell, when you really believe that when he saves you from your sins, you have no fear of judgment, that it's only eternal reward and it's paradise. It's not just bouncing around from cloud to cloud like a naked baby playing harps. He takes us back to paradise. When you really believe that, you might not be I'm not in a hurry. When I found out I had cancer, I wasn't in a hurry to go to heaven. I still want to spend time with my wife and my kids, and there's things I want to see and do. But man, I'm not afraid of heaven. How do you threaten a Christian with heaven?
Yeah, right.
right?
Right.
But you have to be completely convinced that Jesus is who he says he is. And I'm telling you, that's how Lazarus lived the rest of his life.
Oh, for
Already
sure.
been there, guys. It ain't so bad, right?
Yeah. Another thing that we should not overlook is that Jesus, I believe that Jesus wept, not only because of what his friend Lazarus already went through when he died, but also I believe that, the book of Hebrews talks about how he went through every range of human emotion with us and temptations and life experience. This demonstrates that he really embraced the loss of life. Like, so he cried because of the sadness of his good friends, of Mary and Martha and those around him, not to mention his friendship. And it was loss. Jesus knew what was going to happen.
Right.
But there was loss, and Jesus felt loss. And
Well, you see that right there where it says that a deep anger welled up within him.
Right.
He hates what death does to us.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then it's right after that he cried.
So for those of us listening, I'm thinking of my good friend Brian, who I had breakfast with today. For those of us who have loss, just know that Jesus experienced that full range of emotion. He knows exactly what we're going through. And at the same time.
And he's absolutely convinced it's going to be okay.
Right, because there is hope.
Yes.
There is hope.
Yep.
Because Jesus has power over death, and we know that if we trust in him, we really never die.
That's so powerful, man. That's great.
All right. Well, tomorrow we're going to be talking about the Lord's Supper, communion.
It's a big one.
So we're going right up into the crucifixion here.
That's right.
So we're excited. So we hope that you'll tune in.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please help us spread the word by liking this episode and sharing it on your social media platforms. Be sure to leave a comment and review, and don't forget to give us 5 stars. When you do, you help us reach even more people who need a daily devotional like HC Daily. If you'd like to hear more from Chris and Jeff, they're both teaching pastors at Heritage Church, located in Southeast Michigan. You can get more of their messages by clicking on the Messages tab at heritagechurch.com. Be sure to join us again soon for another episode of HC Daily.